Welcome to the Hobbiton Movie Set, a permanent tourist attraction in Matamata, New Zealand that, in the before times, hosted up to 650,000 visitors per year. It employed as many as 320 people and is one of New Zealand's most popular and recognisable tourist sites. And standing here with this view, it's not hard to see why. Peter Jackson's film adaptations of Tolkien's novel are defined by the epic landscapes of Middle-earth, from the sweeping plains of Rohan to the misty mountains cold. But there is one place that, for many of us, truly captures the soul of the Lord of the Rings, and that place is Hobbiton, the sleepy village in the Shire that symbolises everything good and pure in Tolkien's world. So today I am going to tell you the story of how Hobbiton came to be, which means I'm going to go where no other YouTube video essayist has gone before, outside. Let's start at the beginning. Jackson has described location scouting as being like casting actors, so in 1998 the auditions began for suitable locations, led by location scout David Comer.
They were looking for three distinguishing features for Hobbiton: a well-established tree that could be turned into the party tree, a massive water, which could be a lake or a river, and a large hill on top of which they could place Bag End. So they were flying over in a fixed-wing plane. They flew over the Alexander property out here and saw all three of those features out here on the Alexander farm, and they thought, yep, that's the one, that's the place we want, we better go talk to the owners.
So one day in October 1998, David Comer did what location scouts do best. He knocked on the door of the farmhouse and it was answered by Ian Alexander, the proud owner of what is still a working sheep and cattle farm. David Comer introduced himself as a location scout for Wingnut Films, and although he didn't divulge exactly what the movie he was scouting for was, he did mention that it was being directed by Peter Jackson, who was relatively well known in New Zealand at that time. But straight away there was a problem.
Unfortunately for the film crew, it was quite bad timing when they knocked on the door. Ian was watching a game of rugby on television at the time. I was lucky it was the half time, or else he may not even got up out of his seat to answer the door.
If there's one thing you need to know about rural New Zealand is that you don't get between a farmer and his rugby. So when the game was on and a stranger came knocking, Ian's reaction was probably something like this. He probably wanted to get rid of David as soon as possible so he could get back to the game, but that's where Ian's wife Michelle came in, and like Samwise, she is the true hero of this story. Because Michelle was a fan of Tolkien's books and had heard the rumours that Peter Jackson was leading a film series of them. So she gave Ian a nudge and they granted David Comer permission to scout the property with the most Kiwi farmer instructions ever.
He said, righto, go and have a look around by yourself, you'll be fine as long as you close all the gates behind you so you don't mix up my stock.
When the game was over and David had finished his scouting, he returned to the house for a cup of tea and asked if he could return with a larger recce crew. 6 weeks later, on the 12th of December 1998, 3 cars pulled up to Ian's farm carrying a now legendary fellowship of 9 people. There was David Comer, of course, as well as producers Fran Walsh and Rick Porras, concept artists John Howe and Alan Lee, cinematographer Andrew Lesney, production designers Dan Henner and Grant Major, and director Peter Jackson himself. You might have already seen footage of this recce from the DVD special features, and as we saw in that footage, Howe and Lee set up their sketchpads and just began drawing the landscape as Hobbiton. The rolling hills were perfect for the little round hobbit holes and the entire landscape started coming to life. And the team was so impressed with the site that negotiations with the Alexander family began the very next day. And while the paperwork and deals were being drawn up with the Alexanders, the production design team mocked up digital and physical models of how they would convert the landscape into Hobbiton and bring Lee and Howe's drawings to life. Then things started moving pretty quickly.
So contracts were signed in March of 1999. On a Friday, and then the Monday, the New Zealand Army came in, started building the road and the access.
That's right, an army of construction crews, landscape designers, earth-moving machines, and yes, the actual New Zealand Army descended on this obscure corner of New Zealand to build the set, starting on 15th of March 1999. But even though the construction began in March 1999, filming in Hobbiton wouldn't actually start until the 10th of December, which is when the second unit crew moved in to film with extras. And the reason for the huge gap between construction and production was because Jackson wanted the setting to feel overgrown, natural, and lived in. So gardens like this one were planted almost a year in advance to give them time to grow naturally and settle into their landscape. Filming in Hobbiton with the main crew and principal actors began on the 17th of January 2000, and the main unit filmed all of their key exterior scenes in just 1 week, including the very final shot of the trilogy, where Sam, Rosie and Eleanor return to their home here, and the final line of both the book and the film is said. And this was a surreal moment for Jackson and actor Sean Astin because they realised the sheer scale of this production. The shot they had just filmed wouldn't be seen by moviegoers for almost 4 years. 17th of January 2000 is also when Ian McKellen began filming his first ever scenes for the trilogy. After Gandalf's charming reunion with Frodo, we follow the Hobbit and the Wizard in his cart as they take us on a meandering tour of Hobbiton, passing through this very cutting to reveal, for the first time, the Shire. And even in the theatrical cut, we spend a few minutes just lazily rolling through the village, seeing the simple, peaceful life of the Hobbits. Then the extended edition gave us a full 2.5-minute sequence concerning Hobbits that's just delightful. The camera pans over Hobbiton and we see the Grey Wizard making his way up Bagshot Row until, at last, he pulls up to the iconic door of Bag End, in a scene lifted straight from the work of John Howe. And one of the reasons it looks so similar to the artwork is because of that iconic oak tree. This was actually once a real tree that was cut into numbered parts, reassembled on the hill, and engineered to lean over the door using bolts and wires. It took the art department 6 weeks to wire 250,000 artificial leaves onto the structure. And that tree was dismantled when filming wrapped for The Lord of the Rings, but a permanent one was built out of steel, foam, and silicon for the Hobbit films, which still stands today. And this one has over 300,000 silk leaves that were hand-painted by Weta Workshop. Their dedication is one of the reasons this tree makes the iconic vista of Bag End so inviting. And I would love to pop in for some of the old vineyard, but unfortunately we can't go inside. Not only are we not here on party business, this door, like all the ones in Hobbiton, is just a facade. All of the interior scenes were filmed on 2 sets at Stone Street Studio in Wellington, a Hobbit-size set and a miniature one for Gandalf to squeeze into. And they've actually done the same here in Hobbiton too. Some Hobbit holes are scaled for humans to feel at home, while others are at half scale to make you feel like one of the loud, blundering big people that Tolkien talks about in the opening pages of The Hobbit. But this tour of Hobbiton with Gandalf is a truly beautiful way to start a movie and to show us this world and the innocence of the Hobbits. These scenes are full of warmth, light, and colour because they represent what Frodo and the Hobbits set out to protect. And then, when filming was concluded, it was all taken down. Even though the Scouring of the Shire was not included in the film adaptations, it happened in real life. But instead of being taken over by Saruman and his ruffians, Hobbiton was instead taken over and destroyed by the same army of people who had lovingly built it 2 years earlier. Although, speaking of the Scouring of the Shire, the team here have told me that the second unit actually did a full week of night shoots getting scenes of the Scouring for Frodo's vision in the mirror, including shots of hobbit holes being ransacked by orcs and the fire at the Green Dragon. But despite hours of footage being taken of this, all we have ever seen of it is the 10 seconds or so that we glimpsed in The Fellowship. #release the Sharky cut. Where was I? Oh yeah. When production on Lord of the Rings wrapped in February 2000, the Hobbiton set was dismantled. Almost.
So they started pulling everything down, but in that time it began to rain, became unsafe, and they continued dismantling everything. So they said to the Alexander family, hey, is it all right if we go away, come back later on, finish pulling everything down? So they went away. But in that time, before they came back and started pulling everything down, locals had recognised the Kaimai mountain ranges in the distance, in the background of the Shire. So the Alexanders had people coming in, knocking on their door, asking if they could come and have a look around. That's when they decided to pursue the idea of tourism.
Ian Alexander's son Russell saw the business potential in this and began running guided tours of what remained of the set. An accountant by trade, Russell talked to the studios about setting up something official. It took 6 months or so to work out a deal, but Hobbiton first officially opened its doors to the public in December 2002 under the name Rings Scenic Tours. And they expected to welcome about 24 tourists a month, maybe 300 people or so in a year. Well, in their first year, they got over 12,000 visitors. So the tours continued like this until the set was to be reconstructed for the Hobbit films. Work began on planting the gardens in June 2009, again to give them time to settle in and grow naturally. Construction of the buildings began in 2010, and this time they were going to build it for real.
They said, yep, you can come back and reuse our property, but if you want to use our property again, it needs to be built from permanent materials, so it's here for years to come for people to enjoy. And so Peter Jackson said, I was actually thinking the same thing.
A deal was struck between the Alexander family, Peter Jackson, and New Line Cinema to build a permanent set, with the revenue being split between them. So the tours were briefly paused for construction and filming of The Hobbit, which was supposed to begin in February 2011. But Peter Jackson needed an urgent surgery at that time, which delayed filming by 8 months until October 2011, when filming took place over just 11 days. And tours resumed during that period where Jackson was sick, with visitors getting to see the finished set for the first time, but under strict non-disclosure agreements. If nothing else, these tours proved the potential of a full Hobbiton movie set as a tourist attraction. In fact, the only complaint the visitors had was a simple one. There was no food. A hobbit should know better. But thankfully, that has been fixed. Because as we all know, the only food and brew for the brave and true comes from the Green Dragon, a real, working pub serving up the best grub the Shire has to offer, including the South Farthing Ale brewed exclusively for the pub, and, of course,
potatoes.
Out of the many moments that I love in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, one of my absolute favourites is a quiet moment that takes place here, at one of these tables in the closing chapters of The Return of the King. It's when the hobbits share this knowing look and silently make a toast, leaving unspoken their realisation that, after what they have been through, there is no going back. But for those of us who have not gone into the fires of Mount Doom and back again, we can come to Hobbiton and, just for one day, be transported to a place that we have known and loved for over 20 years. Tours of the Hobbiton movie set finish in the Green Dragon, and so too must I leave you. I hope you have enjoyed visiting Hobbiton with me and hope you get the chance to visit yourself before too long. But if you can't wait until then, or if you want to stay with me in Middle-earth a little bit longer, you can subscribe or maybe check out one of the other Lord of the Rings videos on my channel. Cheers and namarie.